What is the bigger concern for Georgia's offense this year? Is it quarterback or wide receiver? Neither one of these are at the top of my concern list for Georgia. Offensively this year, it's offensive line for me. How quickly the tables turn, by the way. What were we saying last year at this time about Georgia's offensive line? Every preview magazine you cracked open, after you inhaled the new magazine smell, you turned to, the top units and you looked at offensive line and it was Georgia by 10 miles, right? Well, now all of a sudden this year, some guys get drafted, some guys transfer, and we're looking at Georgia's offensive line. They're looking at it in Athens just like we are, saying, we're not terrible now. It's not like the well is dry, but we have question marks at least here. Now, offensive line for a very specific reason, and also because it's offensive line, Matt Luke, I might as well put him on that list we're doing, that series of most important and most vital pieces, player or coach, in college football this year. It's Matt Luke. Matt Luke, for those unfamiliar, the former head coach at Ole Miss, is now the offensive line coach at Georgia. Here's the situation for them right now. Interior, probably not in terrible shape. Jamari Salyer is a guy who came on campus. He used to weigh almost a metric ton. He was a monster coming out of high school and was an interior guy all the way. And they feel like he's shaved himself down. He's lost a lot of weight. He's worked his tail off. They feel like, I know a lot of preview magazines don't feel this way. They feel like left tackle, we think that he can slide out there, and we think that we can win in the SEC with him at left tackle, my bad. But the right tackle spot, anybody's guess. And that is even without factoring in the possibility for injury here. So Matt Luke has got it to do. That's a guy that's very handsomely paid. He's very highly thought of, excellent recruiter, probably about the best option you could ever hope to find to fill in for the departing Sam Pittman, who is now the head coach at Arkansas. But they got it to do there. And the reason I bring this up is because everyone wants to talk about Todd Monken coming in. I understand, new offensive coordinator. Everyone wants to talk about Jamie Newman and how Zamir White going to take over and the other backs in the backfield. It's all irrelevant if you don't have offensive line figured out. Wide receiver, we just got asked about that here. George Pickens is a phenomenal talent. Burst on the scene at a time they needed him the most last year. They've got guys that are ready to emerge, in some cases in their second year on campus. It's all irrelevant. If you don't get offensive line figured out, it's all irrelevant. So we've seen what it takes. And now that I think about it, this time last year, when Preview Magazine season hit, I remember doing some radio down in Louisiana. They weren't scared about quarterback. Like internally, LSU folks thought Joe Burrow was going to be great. They didn't know he was going to win the Heisman, but they thought he was going to be good. LSU folks were not scared about their wide receiver situation. They knew they had a ton of talent. They had a ton of depth. The only reason it wasn't proven was because they hadn't run an offense that was capable of proving it. They weren't worried about that. You know what they were worried about at LSU last year? Offensive line. You had Sadiq Charles, I believe, at left tackle, Austin Deculus at right tackle, and I remember hearing guys say, in an ideal world, Charles is probably a right tackle, and Deculus is not a starting tackle in the SEC, and maybe on the interior we'll be okay. They won the Joe Moore Award. That's why LSU won a national championship last year. Their offensive line, which was the question mark unit among many for that offense last year, goes on to win the Joe Moore Award. That was the biggest hidden storyline for the storyline crowd out there in college football last year, that because it involved an offensive line unit, didn't get a lot of run nationally. You saw what Joe Burrow did. You saw what Clyde Edwards-Helaire did. You saw 24 receivers, 1,000-yard seasons for him last year, it seems. It all started with that offensive line. So if we fast forward from now until week 3, when Georgia plays Alabama, middle of the season, whenever they play Auburn and Florida, and if they are to go to the SEC championship game, that's what we'll be looking back at. Whereas nationally, folks will be talking about how Jamie Newman panned out for Georgia and George Pickens and Don Blaylock and whoever else emerged for them at receiver. Insiders at Georgia, and myself on this show included, will inevitably be looking back and saying, good for you, Jamari Salyer, and good for you, whoever emerges at right tackle, and most notably, good for you, Matt Luke. Man, came in and absolutely saved the day for them. That's my biggest question for Georgia.